Hello, everyone. Jenn Shurkus here, and I am so excited to share with you guys how I created this watercolored autumn bouquet. We are going to be using the new Lovely Layers Autumn Bouquet die set from Honeybee Stamps. Throughout this video, you might see little glimpses of the Lovely Layers mushrooms, but sadly, they got cut from production, from my studio production at least. I die cut them, I watercolored them, and I just decided not to use them on this project. However, I do think they'll probably show up in a future project of mine because I adore them. They are so cute. All right, so I am taking all of the elements from the Lovely Layers Autumn Bouquet, and I am die cutting them out of the smooth side of Distress Watercolor cardstock. I'm now just using a number 4 round paintbrush. Honestly, when you guys see the skill level of this watercoloring and how easy it is, any water brush will work. And I am using my beloved Distress Watercolor Pencils. If you guys can't tell by how loved my set looks, I love these things. And I think that they just take the intimidation away from watercoloring. And not to mention, they're all the distress colors that we know and love. And I have just been having a blast creating with these. So as you can see, I am just wetting my paintbrush with a little bit of water, and I'm taking that paintbrush right into the pencil and picking up the pigment, almost like the pencil is the palette. Now, these are woodless watercolor pencils, and they are highly pigmented. They have a lot of pigment, meaning the pencils are going to last a really long time. They're a woodless watercolor pencil, so they can be dipped in your water cup and things like that, and you don't have to worry about ruining the casing that they're in. I colored the first set of stems with some peeled paint, Distress Watercolor Pencil. Then the second stem I colored with Rustic Wilderness. And now we're going to color these sets of leaves. And I'm going to start by painting them with fossilized amber. And again, if your paintbrush has a lot of water on it, your color is going to look a lot lighter in pigment, but that's okay. You can always build up more pigment to get a brighter, more vibrant color. I cannot stress enough that when you're watercoloring, it's all just learning how much water you want or don't want. I'm going in with a little bit of vintage photo and just dusting the edges of these leaves to just add a little bit of shadow. You'll see as I continue to color all of these images or all these die cut pieces, I'm not going to get into a lot of shadowing. I really wanted to keep this pretty simple. And honestly, the beautiful details in these Lovely Layer sets lends them to not needing a whole lot of shadowing or extra detail. So I colored all of these with fossilized amber, and then I'm dusting the edges with some vintage photo. And if I wanted to smooth that edge down a little bit, I just go in with a clean water brush and just dust the edge of that vintage photo, and that will soften the harsh edge. Now we have these little wheat pieces. I wanted to put a splash of teal in here. If you don't know me already, teal is my most favorite color, and I think it's such a pretty color to bring into our fall makes. So I'm coloring these little wheat pieces with peacock feathers. And then to add just a little dimension at the base, I am adding a little bit of Villainous Potion. So just a little deep purple down at the base of these wheat pieces. So pretty. Now we're doing some more stems. These are for the cotton pieces, and I am using vintage photo for these. If I can, when I am die cutting all my pieces, which you guys saw, I used my itty bitty Honeybee Stamps cutter, which made die cutting all these pieces so easy. If I can, I try to keep little pieces in the backing of the cardstock I'm cutting out of. You can see I'm placing some back in place here because as I'm watercoloring these little pieces, it's just so much easier to hold on to if they're part of the backer piece still. So here I am, I'm adding a little bit of color to the cotton at the top of these cotton sticks that we're gonna have. So I'm using a little bit of tattered rose and antique linen. I'm laying the color down on the grooves of the die cut piece that are already there from the die. And then with a clean brush with not a lot of water on it, I'm just blending that color out to soften it and lighten it up a bit. So you can see here, again, it's a mixture of tattered rose and antique linen. And once I get that color down, I clean my brush off. And with a clean brush with only a little bit of water on the brush, I pull that color from the pigmented area that I left behind, and I just soften the edge. Of course, cotton is white, but I wanted to add a little bit of shadow, a little bit of fall hint to these cotton pieces. For these flowers that are going to be part of the main focal point of my card, I am mixing some picked raspberry and some seedless preserves. So with a wet brush, I'm going right into seedless preserves and then right into picked raspberry and then painting. And now you can see I'm going in with seedless preserves at the base of these flowers. And now I'm blending it out with a clean brush with only a little bit of water. I know it's hard to see the shape of what I'm watercoloring because again, I'm scribbling out of the lines, but this is what makes it so nice to keep your layers within the piece that you die cut it from. You also might see me touch my hand with my paintbrush as I'm watercoloring. This is just a way for me to have a sense of how much water is on my paintbrush. Like I mentioned, I think the trickiest part of watercoloring is figuring out how much water you want to have the look that you're going for. So I'll often touch my wet paintbrush to my hand so I can get a sense of how much water is there because it's hard for my eyes to see, but I can definitely feel. So now I'm coloring the tops of these flowers with a little bit of Rusty Hinge and Wild Honey. I always like to color the base of these lovely layers, even if I am layering a piece on top. I like to color the base with a base color, just in case maybe I don't get my die cut in place perfectly or any of the edges peek out once things are all glued together. So now I decided to add a little dimension to these as well. So I'm adding a little bit of Rusty Hinge to the center of these top layers. And as I mentioned on the base layers, I do like to add a little bit of color. So I'm going back here and adding a little picked raspberry, a little seedless preserves to these base pieces. Again, they're going to be mostly covered, but I just like to cover my bases. I was working on my glass tabletop, so it was really easy to clean up with my flower sackcloth. I have another piece of Distress Watercolor cardstock, the textured side, and I'm taking my paintbrush and I'm picking up some pigment from the pencil. My paintbrush has quite a bit of water on it, and I'm flicking out some water splatters. I'm doing, I'm trying to think, I think it was walnut stain, seedless preserves. I'm drying it a little bit in between colors so that when I splatter a new color, they don't mix together. And now you're going to see where I'm going to start to splatter some peacock feathers. Again, just bringing in that touch of teal. I love how this looks. I try to direct my splatters in a diagonal line. Of course, they're going to go wherever they want to go, but you can try your best to kind of concentrate them in the vicinity. Once this is all done, with a messy brush, meaning I'm dipping into my dirty paint water, I'm going to splatter some water droplets. And then I'm just going to set this aside to dry. And I like to do this because the water droplets are dirty water from my paint bucket. Um, so they're going to leave a little bit of a texture behind, but then it also will make some of the splatters blend together and mix together. And I just like the texture that appears. There are those mushrooms again. I'm just teasing you. They are not going to be used, sadly, but I saved them. They'll be on a future project. So I'm adding a little bit of wet adhesive and I'm starting to piece together all of these fun elements from the Autumn Bouquet Lovely Layers set. Once I've layered those elements on top, I just like to put an acrylic block there just to kind of give a little bit of weight and help that wet glue settle. Now, this purpley flower has some pretty tiny pieces. So as I took them off of the backing, I kind of figured out which piece went where, and it was pretty easy by size. But because these are such smaller pieces, I'm going to use my pickup tool. I think it's a lot easier than my fingers. So I'm adding a little bit of wet adhesive to the base, and then I'm using that pickup tool to kind of place in those toppers. And I don't know about you guys, but I really am addicted to all of these lovely layers sets and how easily they come together and the dimension that leads itself to the finished project. I just love them so much. You can see I moved my acrylic block over to the next set so that it will settle. And now we are going to do the little cotton sprigs. At least I think that's what they are. That's what I'm going with. So we've got all the little cotton balls and then we have the stem. The unique part of this is the stem is actually going to go in front of the cotton. So I'm just making sure that I understand where everything's going before I get to placing things. And as you can see, I'm like, wait a minute, this bigger piece I think goes down below and then the smaller piece goes up above. So I just wanted to make sure I had an idea of where things were going to go. And now I'm putting some wet adhesive on the back of the stem. And this way I'm going to press it onto the front of these little cotton poofs. And I just love these. I think they're so fun. I would have never thought to add them to my autumn bouquet, but now that I have them in here, I'm so glad that they're there. So you can see most items I did 2 sprigs of, except for those purpley pinky flowers. That, like I said, is going to be the focal point. And you'll kind of see why I chose to do 2 of everything as my card layout comes together in just a couple minutes. So once I get these little cotton pieces together, you can see I moved my acrylic block to make sure everything is situated. All right, so now I'm cutting out a banner out of some vellum, just basic vellum, just to add another texture to my card, and it's going to help set apart my sentiment onto my bouquet that's going to be overpowering my card in a few minutes. And once I have this die cut, then I am going to be picking a sentiment from the Heartfelt Hello stamp set. I think this is such a fun stamp set, and there are so many different fun sentiments in it. And I'm going to get myself a piece of Distress Watercolor cardstock, the size of this sentiment, and I want to add some color to it. So I'm going to use my Distress Watercolor pencils again, and I'm going to use a mixture of the picked raspberry and the seedless preserves. I figured kind of bring in that color some more since I only have one set of flowers that is going to be this color. I want to make sure that I heat this with my Ranger heat tool so it's nice and dry, crispy dry, because next I am going to stamp that sentiment on there. I'm going to use a VersaFine Onyx Black, to stamp the sentiment, and then I am going to die cut it with the coordinating die. When you're stamping little sentiments like this, you just want to make sure you have a gentle pressure, especially with your stamping platform. You can always stamp it again if you didn't get a full impression. And I'm grabbing that coordinating die, and I'm going to go ahead and die cut this. I'm using some Spellbinder's Best Ever craft tape to hold my die in place. And we'll get this sentiment cut out. So now we've got our splattered background. I have my sentiment just laying on the vellum banner right now. This is not attached to my card. It's just giving me a sense of placement. And now is where I pretend to be a florist, which I am not. But I am going to start to arrange this fall bouquet. And you can see this is where the two elements are coming into play. I'm going to kind of put one element on one side and another on the other. I'm adding a wet glue to the stems and attaching that to the card background, but I'm going to add some foam squares towards the top so that these sprigs will kind of look like they're coming out at you, just to add some dimension and some texture. I really liked how this was going, so now I know to just do this from the beginning and not try to sneak them in after. So again, a little bit of wet adhesive on the stems, and then I'm just sliding these different sprigs in, a little bit on the left and a little bit on the right. Again, my sentiment banner is not attached. I'm really just kind of using that as a placeholder, just so I kind of know where things are going. So as I start to put these guys down, my orange flowers, which I'm not even going to pretend to know what kind of flowers all of these things are, or leaves, or anything. But as I start to put these guys down, I quickly learn that I want to fill in my center space a little bit more. And you'll see in just a minute where I'm really going to manipulate the curve of these sprigs. And I love the flexibility that I'm able to do this. So once I get these down, I now know my purple flower is going to go in the center. Oh, scratch that. I got to put the cotton down first. I'm getting ahead of myself. So we're going to put the cotton pieces in and kind of use these as filler. And I love that they just kind of have that subtle color to them. And now is where I'm like, I have a really big spot in the center and this is not filling it. So you can see I'm just gently prying those orange flowers. Remember, I put that on with a little foam square. So I did have a little bit of grace time with those. And I am just kind of curving them inward to fill that space a little bit more. And I love how that worked out. I love how easily it worked out. And so I was really happy again that I used those little foam squares, because if I had put this all down with wet adhesive, that would have been a little bit trickier. Also, I don't mind the ends of my stems kind of hanging out at the bottom there, but one had gotten a little long, so don't hesitate. You can always trim those off to make things look cleaner towards the bottom. And now you can see I am adding that purple centerpiece flower, the one that I only did one of, and that's filling in that spot really nicely. Just making sure I like how things are going. So I have the sentiment on my vellum with foam strips. And now what I did is I added wet adhesive behind the foam strips. I personally have yet to find a vellum adhesive that I love, so I always just try to hide my adhesive when I'm working with vellum. I'm going to grab a piece of pattern paper from the Homestead Harvest paper pad. This kind of moody blue paper I thought would look really nice. Again, bringing in the bluish tealish color that I have going on in little splashes. I'm going to attach this to my card base. If you've been keeping track, the year of 2023 is the year of card bases for me. I'm trying so hard to not just make card fronts, but to get my cards on actual card bases. And now I'm going to adhere this panel to the card with some foam strips just to add a little bit more dimension. I love the way that looks set off of this beautiful pattern paper. Honeybee Stamps has such awesome pattern papers, and I really need to remember to use them more often. And once I get this in place, I knew I wanted to add a little bling, and you can see my vellum on the right is not really cooperating as well as I would like. It's kind of like hanging out up in the air. So I'm going to use some Homestead Harvest gem stickers, and I'm going to be a little sneaky with one of my gems. I am going to put the gem half on the vellum and half on my card. And that's going to kind of tack it down a little bit so that it won't flail around as much. So I'm adding some of these teal and rusty orange colored gems sprinkled again in a diagonal line here and there to add a little sparkle. Because I didn't use glitter. I can't believe it, but I didn't. Distress rock candy glitter would look gorgeous on the tips of some of these elements, like the cotton and those golden leaves. Oh, maybe I need to make the card again and do that next time. If you do that, please share your card with me. I would love, love, love to see what you created. Well, hopefully watching me color these elements showed you how easy and no stress it really can be. Uh, the Distress Watercolor pencils make it so easy. The pigment just flows around the paper so easily. If you are a fan of Distress products in general, then you already know what colors you know and love. And there we go, the finished card. So fun. I love the texture and the layers. Have a fabulous day, you guys. Thank you so much for watching.